The movie begins with intense communication over military radios. Soldiers are in panic mode, reporting an unforeseen attack by mysterious creatures all around the world. One soldier says, "This is Netherland, Colorado. Most of our town is destroyed, but everything above 8,000 feet remains untouched." Despite their best efforts, the military is quickly overwhelmed. 3 years later, the remaining humans have sought refuge high in the mountains because these monsters can't ascend above 8,000 feet above sea level. In the Colorado Rockies, a small town shelters a group of survivors, including a boy named Hunter. Hunter ventures below the safe altitude line to use binoculars and check out a neighboring settlement on a distant mountain. On his way back, he notices a glowing red light following him. A monster has picked up his scent. Hunter sprints up the slope toward the safe altitude boundary. Just as the creature gets close, he crosses the line, and the monster stops its pursuit. Back home, Hunter tells his dad, Will, about the encounter. Furious, Will scolds him for risking his life and reminds him of his weak lungs, which could have given out during the chase. Hunter uses oxygen every night. Later, Will goes hunting with Caddy, a friend of his late wife, Tara. He explains that Hunter often goes below the boundary to look at another community. Caddy understands. Hunter misses having friends his age and longs for someone to play with. But Will adds it's not just about loneliness. The place Hunter visits is where he last saw his mom. While tracking a deer, Will and Caddy successfully bring down their prey and start heading back. Along the way, they notice their neighbor, Na, tinkering with makeshift armor-piercing rounds. She's testing them on a piece of a monster's tough, almost indestructible scales. Before the apocalypse, Na was a brilliant scientist dedicated to her work. Now she dreams of finding a way to kill the creatures. That evening, Will hears a warning beep from the inhalation machine his son uses at night. He quickly replaces the filter so Hunter can breathe. Born prematurely, Hunter has underdeveloped lungs that could fail any time. Realizing the stock of filters is running low, Will decides to risk a deadly trip to the lowlands, specifically to Boulder. He believes the hospital there might still have supplies. The next day, Will spends time with Hunter, teaching him how to protect their potato plants from the cold and showing him how to catch fish properly. It's Hunter's birthday, so Will buys the last packet of macaroni and cheese, Hunter's favorite dish, to make a special dinner. As they eat, Hunter laments his lack of social interaction and asks why they don't use the radio to communicate with others. Will explains that their electricity is barely enough to power Hunter's machine, so they stay in touch with other shelters using flags. After dinner, Caddy stops by with a couple of beers. Sitting on the porch, she and Will reminisce about their carefree lives before the apocalypse while watching Na's latest experiments. Later that night, Hunter has another respiratory attack, forcing Will to use an emergency syringe of medicine since they've run out of machine filters. Realizing he's out of time, Will heads to Na's house in the middle of the night. Their conversation reveals that Na once ventured to Boulder's labs to gather chemicals and equipment for her research on weapons against the monsters. It was during that trip that Tara, Will's wife, was killed. Will harbors deep resentment toward Na for leading Tara to her death. However, because Na is the only one to have ever returned alive from such a trip, Will asks her to accompany him to the hospital. Na refuses, calling the idea sheer madness, as the creatures would tear them apart. Will insists she owes him this much, pointing out that she has nothing left to lose. He leaves, confident she will eventually join him. After Will departs, Na begins crafting a special compass, haunted by flashbacks of her last excursion when she witnessed the monsters slaughtering her friends, including Tara. This guilt compels her to agree to the mission, and she goes to Will. Will asks a local woman to look after Hunter for 5 days while he ventures to retrieve the filters. In the morning, Will stocks up on weapons at the armory for the journey. Caddy finds him there and confronts him for leaving without saying anything. Determined, Caddy grabs a gun and insists on joining the expedition. Despite Will's protests, Caddy argues that he can't go out there alone and needs a partner to watch his back. Outside, Na is already waiting. She warns Caddy that the monsters up close are nothing like the ones she's used to seeing from the mountaintop. They tear through people effortlessly, and bullets don't affect them. The only way to slow them down for a few seconds is to shoot them directly in the face. Before they leave, Will promises Hunter he'll return in 5 days. Hunter bitterly reminds him that those were the exact words his mother said before her fatal trip with Na. The group sets off along a planned route designed to minimize their time below the safe altitude. To save time, they intend to use a ski lift to quickly pass the lowland. Along the way, tensions run high between Na and Caddy, who openly dislike each other. Frustrated by Na's attitude, Will knocks a flask of alcohol out of her hand. When they spot a wrecked military convoy below, destroyed by monsters, they decide to descend and scavenge the abandoned Toyota Land Cruisers and the remains of the soldiers for supplies. As they hike down the trail, Na explains that her compass can detect monsters within half a mile. Their magnetic field is stronger than that of any living organism on the planet. She hands the compass to Caddy, tasking her with keeping watch, while Will searches for gear and Na digs up a piece of armored monster scale for further research. While scavenging, Will finds an underbarrel grenade launcher but admits he has no idea how to use it. Caddy takes it confidently, attaching it to her rifle. Before continuing their journey, they exchange heated words. Na accuses Caddy of flirting with the husband of her deceased friend, while Caddy retorts that Tara's death is Na's fault. The argument escalates, and the two exchange blows before reluctantly moving on. Along the way, they encounter a large herd of wild horses, a sign that nature is thriving in the absence of humans in the lowland. Eventually, they reach an old ski resort with a lift that will take them to the next mountain. Na notices a monster on the compass. It's close, its warning light glowing in the forest behind them. Caddy wants to run to higher ground, but Na argues there's no time. Will sides with Na and sprints to the lift control room to power it up. As the monster closes in, Caddy fires the grenade launcher at it. The explosion slows the creature for a moment, but doesn't harm it. While Caddy and Na take defensive positions and fire at the advancing monster, Will manages to restore power and start the lift. He and Na hop onto a chair and begin ascending. Caddy, now higher up, climbs the support pole and leaps toward the moving lift. She barely grabs hold of the chair's edge, and Will grabs her arms to pull her up. Just then, the monster lashes out with a tentacle, striking the cable. The resulting shockwave shakes the chair violently, causing all three to fall to the ground. Fortunately, the drop isn't too high. Scrambling to their feet, they sprint toward the safe altitude line. They reach the boundary just as the monster halts at the edge, unable to follow. That night, the group shelters in one of the resort houses, sharing a bottle of whiskey before bed. Na explains how the initial attack by the creatures was so swift and overwhelming that humanity had no chance to identify their weaknesses. Seeing them up close is different. Civilization collapsed in days. She reveals that the monsters only attack humans, ignoring animals entirely, which challenges the idea that they are predators hunting for food. They don't consume their kills, they just exterminate humans, adding to the mystery. No one has ever seen them sleep. Na also finds it bizarre that the monsters are strictly limited by altitude, unable to climb above a certain height. Before sleeping, Will reflects on a conversation he had with Tara before her fatal trip to Boulder with Na. He had tried to dissuade her, accusing Na of being driven by a self-desire to immortalize her name as the first to kill a monster. He argued that Na, having no family of her own, couldn't understand the value of life and was willing to lead anyone to their death to achieve her goal. The next day, the trio reaches the entrance to a mine that tunnels through the mountain and exits on the other side. Na is shocked and furious that Will didn't warn them about this road. She reminds him that while the entrance and exit are above the safe zone, the middle of the tunnel dips below it, with multiple offshoots descending even deeper. How do you know these tunnels are perfectly straight? That they don't bow somewhere in the middle, taking us below the line? Did you not think about that? We're going below the line, aren't we? Given that the monsters emerge from underground and navigate effortlessly, this route puts them at a significant disadvantage. They come from underground, Will. They're built for it. We're not. They can see in the dark and detect the smallest amount of CO2, which we exhale. Despite the risks, they strap on helmets with flashlights and venture deeper into the mine. Upon reaching the far end, they discover the exit is locked with no other option, so they descend a ladder into a lower tunnel to find an alternate way out. So what do we do when we get to the bottom? We just start sprinting? We can't sprint across. We'll just exhaust ourselves and make too much noise. Worse than that, we'll quadruple our CO2 output, which they can track from a mile away. That's what that BL is at the end of the tentacles. So, slow and steady. Are we ready? No, just need a minute to ponder my own death. You're funnier than I realized. Thanks. You're smarter than I realized. In one of the corridors below, they cover their flashlight beams with their hands and spot a faint red glow. They take off running. Caddy fires a grenade at the entrance, hoping to block it with debris, but the blast barely slows the creature. The group squeezes into a narrow crawl space, turning off their flashlights and holding their breath to avoid releasing carbon dioxide. The monster searches for them, its tentacle sensors probing the air. As the creature gets closer, Will ignites a flare, distracting it long enough for the group to crawl further down the tunnel. Caddy leads the way, but suddenly comes face to face with another monster waiting in the darkness. The creature impales her with its tentacle and drags her away into the shadows. Will and Na, devastated but unable to help, find another ladder and climb out of the mine to safety. They mourn Caddy briefly before pressing on toward a ranger house where they plan to spend the night. At the house, Will discovers a package of macaroni and cheese, Hunter's favorite meal. He reflects on how many times he's made it for his son, who always asks for it. It's the case, the milk protein, and cheese. It's like an opioid as addictive as morphine. As they sit by the fire, Na shares her hypothesis. The monster scales generate an electromagnetic field. If she can design a bullet that disrupts the field, it could cause the creatures to explode. A projectile, a bullet bonded with Parrot, hits them theoretically, creating a momentary million-volt differential and boom uncontrollable internal combustion. However, she needs chemicals from a lab to test her theory. Will dismisses the idea as ridiculous and expresses regret that his wife died trying to help Na with her crazy theory. That's what you've been working on all this time, literally a magic bullet. It's not magic, it's science. It's a guess, a hypothesis. In the morning, Will and Na take the ranger's truck and drive down to the safe boundary where the city and hospital they need to reach are located. Accelerating down the road, they race toward the hospital. Upon arriving, they cautiously make their way inside, searching for the medical supply storage. Moving quietly up to the upper floors, they find the storage room, but the shelves are empty. Hearing a suspicious noise from the ground floor, they press onward. Eventually, Will discovers another storage area stocked with the filters he needs. He fills his backpack while Na nervously notes the presence of a nearby monster on her compass. As they make their way toward the exit, the creature smashes through walls, trying to reach them. The pair scrambles to the next floor, but a tentacle bursts through the wall and wraps around Will. Na swings a fire axe at the tentacle, forcing it to release Will. Activating the fire suppression system for cover, they flee down the hallway, spotting a storage room filled with oxygen tanks. Will devises a plan. He orders Na to run while he sets up an ambush. Waiting until the monster charges, he fires a precise shot at one of the tanks, triggering an explosion. The blast blows the creature out of the building, leaving it motionless outside. Na, who didn't actually leave, insists they take a detour to a nearby lab instead of heading straight back to the mountains. How much time did you just buy yourself? 6 months, a year? Then you're right back here again. We can't live like this forever. Sooner or later, we have to fight them. We can prove that they can be killed. Everyone else stuck on those mountaintops will know it. The whole world will come and fight with us. Will reluctantly agrees. As they drive off, they fail to notice the monster stirring, coming back to life. At the lab where Na once worked, she seems more confident while experimenting with chemicals, coating bullets in various materials, and testing them on pieces of monster armor. Will explores the facility and stumbles upon Na's old office, finding a photo of her family. He confronts her, never knowing she had children. Na admits she lost them during the monster attack because she had gone to work that day, even though it was her day off. She confesses she's haunted by the guilt of not dying with them. She had the same thought about Tara. I never should have encouraged her to come with me. I was overconfident. I thought I'd figured out a way to hold him off, and I was wrong. It's any consolation. I hate myself more than you could possibly hate me. I only blame you because it's easier than blaming myself. I knew she was going to go, even after I tried to stop her, and I let it happen. You can't blame yourself. Neither of us can. The initial experiments yield no results. Frustrated, Will suggests they leave, but Na insists he should go on without her. She plans to stay and keep working. If she succeeds, she promises to catch up in her car, which has been gathering dust in the parking lot for 3 years. Will wants to help, but Na urges him not to risk his life for her. It's her responsibility alone. Besides, Hunter needs the filters, and without them, he won't survive. Na refines her process, using a blowtorch to help the coating on her bullets dry faster. When the compass needle stalls, signaling the approach of a monster, she notices some rechargeable batteries and decides to incorporate cobalt, a material used to create powerful, heat-resistant magnets. She successfully crafts and charges her first cobalt-coated bullet just as a monster crashes into the building. Taking aim, she fires. Meanwhile, Will speeds toward the mountain in the ranger's truck, but a tire blows out, causing the vehicle to skid and crash into a boulder before flipping over. Will loses consciousness. When he wakes, it's evening, and he hears the growls of a nearby monster. Grabbing his backpack, he takes off on foot, running toward the safety of higher ground. The monster chases him relentlessly across the rugged terrain. As he nears the safe zone, another monster blocks his path, and a third soon joins them. The creatures close in, trapping him. Desperately, Will fires at them, knowing it's a losing battle. Suddenly, one of the monsters collapses, motionless, and explodes into fiery fragments. At the top of the hill stands Na, triumphant, wielding a rifle loaded with cobalt bullets. The bullets short-circuit the monster's electromagnetic fields, causing them to explode. Na takes down the remaining creatures, revealing their robotic interiors. The debris suggests they aren't organic but machines programmed to target humans and avoid altitudes above 8,000 feet. It's not a living creature that's programming their super advanced design, hinting at extraterrestrial origin or maybe Chinese. It was a joke, sorry. Will and Na return to the village where Hunter greets his father with a tearful hug. Na raises a flag with a Jolly Roger symbol on the village flagpole, a signal to other settlements that she has discovered a way to fight the monsters. The good news spreads over the radio, and the locals begin crafting makeshift cobalt-coated bullets using available materials. At the village memorial by the river, Na and Will place a bullet inscribed with Caddy's name, honoring her sacrifice. Together, they set out to fulfill her dream to fight back against the monsters. A volunteer squad armed with the new weapons descends from the mountains. The camera pans over the landscape from a bird's eye view, revealing flashes of explosions in the distance as alien robots are destroyed. Humanity is finally fighting back. On this hopeful note, the film ends.